everyone out there in the universe, all the girls, all the gays, all the in-betweens. Welcome back to Four Mortal Coils on this special, I almost said evening. It is not the evening.
We
This is
had
the
this
first
little
time.
problem.
All right. It's the first time we're recording an episode in the AM time. So hopefully the consistency remains, if there was any to begin with. So today we're going to be talking, Today we're going to be talking a little bit more freeform. I don't know. I really enjoy just kind of throwing things around every once in a while. That can just kind of come from the heart, from the soul, from the mind.
Ray, I really feel sometimes like it's a spectrum, you know, and it's kind of weird because on my screen right now it's Steve, Trevor, Bray, and like it's like a spectrum from most organized, podcast episodes to least organized. You know what I mean? But like we said at the beginning, though, I mean, certain audience members, our fourth mortal coil included, are going to be attracted to certain episodes. I feel that way.
Yeah, it's totally true. It's totally
true.
So
the topic of today's episode, I know, Trevor, you put in the Discord aesthetics part 2, and I kind of wrote that down as well, because I really don't know how to frame the question or the topic. It's really more of just a free-form discussion about different art mediums, art formats, and what you think their strengths and weaknesses, fortes and limitations are. And I thought about this topic a few days ago while I was in between doing multiple different things. Matter of fact, I was just telling you guys, we were talking about schedules and how we're like, man, we got to plan our schedules down to the 30 minutes to the hour to make sure we get all the things that we need or want to get done. And right now I'm doing multiple different things, whether it's writing or reading, or I'm learning 2 different languages right now at the same time. I'm doing a lot of things. While also trying to, stream on Twitch and play video games and do all of these things. And so I constantly am exposed to different mediums of art or, just information transfer. So I think about the capability of one thing or the other. And just to clarify, when I'm talking about art mediums, I've got a bunch of different ones written down here. So, listener, I'm talking about things like mainly that can convey a story. As much as something like architecture, it can be considered an art medium. It absolutely is. I don't know that it falls necessarily within the realm of the discussion that I'm trying to craft today. I'm referencing more like painting, film, music, radio, video games, theater, photography, even tabletop RPG. I was at the store a couple days ago looking at a new one that popped up right across the street from me, and I was like, look at all these worlds and stories
I
me.
noticed a significant lack of books in that list, Ray. I'm
Okay, well, yeah, books. Yeah, well, it could go on forever. Yes, books is part of that as well. There will always be that. That's why I said something as out there as architecture in the realm of this, because there'll be somebody who's like, "What about architecture?" or something. The architecture student. Anyway,
I feel like you ignored books because I'm a writer. You did that for me,
right?
Specifically to fuck with Steven.
As a person who probably owns the most books out of the 3 of you, 3 of us, I forgot books. I got books in the garage. I got books in the attic. I got books in my room. I got books in the office. I got
books on books on books.
Reminds me of that lyric. I got books in the attic. My grandma's diabetic.
Right.
What is
and
that?
I'm
how
like,
it goes?
did the David Bowie quote where he's like, I've got warehouses full of books, and some days I just walk through them and go, fuck me, I'll never be able to read all of these.
That really reminds me of something. This is Carl Sagan. Cosmos, Carl Sagan, like the TV show that he did for a little while. There's an episode where like he's walking across this very ornate, very nice library, and he shows like, look at all these shelves of books. I'm trying to do a Sagan impression.
Look at all these shelves and books,
Yeah. Look across, count these shelves and count these books. See these 4 shelves? no man could read more than you cannot read more than this many books within one lifetime. If you were to read a book for every moment of every day, you could only read this many. And then he showed,
Yeah.
and then it was only like, I said 4. It was less than that. It was like a very small amount, like these thick volumes, but nevertheless, he just showed you like 4 shelves. It was like, you must ask yourself, like, well, how big was the shelf? What's the content? That kind of thing. You're gonna have
It's
to
one
just go
of
watch the episode.
life's greatest tragedies.
And you're gonna have to pick for yourself, because there's a very finite amount that you can actually read. Like behind me, I have this big bookshelf right here. I have not read all of those books. A lot of those are just on there because one day I know I'll be seized by the need to learn more about Sartre, I guess. I don't know.
Well, let's dive in then. And honestly, I don't really have a jumping off point, but maybe that's a good place to start. Is what do you feel like? I'm trying to formulate a question about.
I have a good question
Yeah,
that we
go
can
ahead.
start off with. So we three know, and dear listener, in case you don't, the printing press, right, was one of the most significant inventions in human history. Getting information out to as many people like as possible, right? Um, we have put that so totally to shame with with like the internet. You know what I mean? Like the amount of information we can just kind of communicate to a whole mass of people is so much different than it has been in I mean just 100 years ago. And so like I wanted to know if you guys think that books are on their way out. And I actually have a really cool story to talk about this, right? Before we get answers. So I was I'm a writer, and I lost power the other day. That's why we couldn't do
That's why-
do the
that's why we're
episode
here.
That's why we're in the AM.
in the
yeah.
evening. And so my phone, and this is going to sound so toxic and so bad, but my phone could not be charged. So I said to myself, okay, I need to continue my daily activity of like writing. Where could I charge my phone and write? The library. You know, like it took me way too long to come to that conclusion. You know what I mean? And so, and that's embarrassing for me, truly. But here's the thing: I go to the library, I start writing on my story. I made excellent progress. I mean, I'm very happy with the progress I've made on my project this summer, and so on it goes. But then I decided to change of pace was in order. So I just got up and started looking around at the books that were available, and I was astounded. I was astounded by the new content that was available for young readers, especially. And I got to thinking to myself, what are we doing? Uh, we are on like sometimes our third remake of something. You know what I mean, from the 80s, as though we haven't progressed from there. And I look at this shelf, and there are actually 100 brand spanking new books from brand spanking new authors, and I'm wondering what the fuck, like, you know what I mean, like you know, how's a writer like me supposed to get their foot in the door if at the most top echelon of culture all we're worried about is doing remakes and stuff like that. So actually, that little library visit gave me hope that books are not on their way out. We're just in kind of like this big ass lull where where for most people all we're exposed to are old ideas. What do we think?
Oh, I'll tell you. Let me get this in real quick, because it's about to just very quickly turning into a very politically militarized art episode by Bray. I'll tell you what it is, because certain people have one of my favorite infamous buzzwords: a fiduciary responsibility. When
No idea.
regards to these movies. Okay,
Yeah,
so
for people out there, explain what a fiduciary responsibility
Haven't
is.
even the slightest clue.
So a fiduciary responsibility, explain it like I'm 5. Basically, and it comes in many formats, but we're talking about a system in which we are trying to make a shareholder profit. So
Right.
people have a stake in something, and it is the responsibility of the people in charge of the stake to ensure that the shareholders make maximum profit possible, which often comes at the expense of anything and
Quality.
everything else. So, yeah, fiduciary responsibility. See the housing market crash of 2008. There's a great book with a great movie called The Big Short, and we're going to that, but that's an aside. A fiduciary responsibility. These studios or whatever, as opposed, it's the same issue that the music industry has. It's like the top 40 music industry, if you can really call that a thing, I guess. They will go for what's easy, what's sensational, what is guaranteed to bring in money quickly, and then move on, which is where a reboot comes in. Almost everything has been rebooted at this point, it feels like, and that's because it is guaranteed to get people in the seats. When Star Wars was remade for the sequel trilogy, that brought in, I want to say, The Force Awakens capped at like one of the most profitable, like top 10, top 5 probably, like highest grossing movies of all time. And that's because there's more.
And now it's living proof that throwing money at an IP is not good enough.
Right, because there's been an astounding amount of outrage and backlash over the sequel trilogy because of how unplanned and unprepared it was, and that could, just go to show you that people were looking at that like, oh, hey, we just bought Star Wars IP from George Lucas for all this money. What was it, billions of dollars?
Sure.
And they're like, just throw out the first thing you can think of. We're not even going to plan the entire thing because people are going to show up to watch it, the first Star Wars movie in 10 years anyway. Blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, sorry. I had to get that out there. Why risk
No,
taking on a
no.
work by a new author?
Honestly, that's where we should start.
I don't think that's this is gonna sound strange, but I don't necessarily think that that's new in a lot of ways. I think
It's not
that's
new.
no. I mean, it's like this. So I'm gonna get it as old as I can get it. So during like the what would you call like the heroic period in like ancient Greece, like the period where like Homer and his epics of like the Iliad and all the stories before and after the Iliad and the Odyssey and all that kind of thing. I mean, a lot of that was just the constant repetition of a story, a cultural ethos that existed amongst all those people at that time. And you could really say that's true for just about everything for everyone around. It's we really do that very often. There's like this constant like power stream, like this wave of the culture that we all have for ourselves and for you and I
I
at
love how
Star
you said
Wars.
that, Trevor. So you said like this wave of culture, right?
Yes.
And so it really is one of those emergent things I'm always going on about. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's like we kind of converge on something in culture, and we kind of get hung up on it for a while, and then it continues converging into something else.
Yeah, and all the while, what you have are these people here and there and over there that are very creative. And they will go out and stretch beyond what is currently a part of the wave and
Exactly.
feel around. And what'll happen is a lot of those people will die, like they will fail. Just like the spider that decides to go this way instead of that way as part of their evolutionary progression and doesn't get to reproduce. A lot of them won't reproduce. A lot of them won't get any traction. There are so many people that didn't go Van Gogh. That is to say that were never discovered in their lives and never got discovered. And then there are every now and again there will be a Van Gogh where someone goes out and touches on something and everyone's like, "Wow, look at that. Look at that right there. Look at that." And they'll attenuate to that thing. And all of a sudden, what's on everyone's calendars? Like Van Gogh paintings, what's on everyone's coffee cups, Van Gogh paintings. It's like on the mind. It's been brought into the wave. But all the while, I mean to say, like all the while, what happens is you have little tendrils of creative people all around that just feel around. Like during like the 50s, you have like the beatniks that go around and do their thing, and then so on and so forth. Every little thing, you have little people tendrils going out and feeling things and trying out new ideas. It's interesting, but I think A lot of what you see
what
with
do
the
we usually
rehash of
call
Star
that?
Wars.
What do we
Uh,
usually call that? The Vanguard, right?
those people, the creative types that go out and feel around.
Yeah.
You can call. I don't know. I mean,
And
Vanguard's kind of a
well,
fun
as
term.
well as
It's
avant-garde.
Pioneers.
Yeah.
pioneers, also good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Avant-garde,
gonna say
yes, that's the
avant-garde.
best one. That's the best one. And it seems to me that that's kind of what we're touching on here. The three of us are talking about the avant-garde and how like they don't seem to be getting attention. And I mean to say that I don't think they always get this amount of attention. I think that this is just necessarily what it is. You have a constant wave effect where constantly people are going around that are very like uh, uh, where their minds are very not creative and they just want to create something that's profitable and useful, and they know it works. Star Wars works, so they rehash it.
So
All the while, every now and again, you get a creative person that feels something else, an entrepreneur of the mind.
I would challenge that. I'm not saying I disagree with you, Trevor, but I am going to ask you like the simplest question that would have to be asked about that. Why does it? Why is it necessarily that way? Why did you use that language? Why is it necessary that we will always have like the bell curve type thing where it's like the great majority of content that people put out is just shit. You know what I mean? And then over here, we
By
have the small
Mhm.
minority that are creating what will become new.
It's not. Well, first thing I have to say is annoying. It's complicated. So it's just shit. It is just shit. To someone who looks at it and goes, "It's just shit. It's just shit. It's just shit. It's just falling into that wave of emotion of it." But I mean, I'm telling you, I was 11 once. I walked in and watched Iron Man 1 when it first came out. I thought I would be really cool if I could go off and fly in my rocket boots. I thought about these things. I was that kid. I do think it is just shit to those people that are trying to go out and create something. I think it is. I think that's an emotional tether that we create ourselves. I think it is what it is. Now, to ask, like, why does it that way? Why is it necessarily that way? Your actual question. Um, I mean to say necessarily because I'm trying to connect it across history and say that I see it here, 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 and there. I can't tell you why it is that way. I just say that I see it that way. This is
Yeah.
just another abstraction. This is me
Well,
grabbing tethers. If you wanted to, and this is also more scary, you can go in and create an entirely different perspective and innervate it with all sorts of ideas based on history as well. You'll find that there are many different narratives that you can pull out of history. That's
for sure.
necessarily true.
For sure.
Well,
But
I would say
yeah, go
one
ahead.
thing is, this is a sort of tangential to something that comes up a lot when we talk about music. Like, why is it that we have this bell curve, or particularly now? Number one, you said it yourself earlier, Stephen. We have the advent of the internet to thank for a lot of our exposure to less quality media. And
Certainly.
that's because we are now more connected to things that aren't so good. Back 40 years ago when you were listening to the radio, uh, you didn't hear the songs that weren't popular because it had to go through so many different filters before it got broadcast onto that radio in your car or wherever you were. Now you can find shit music on YouTube, Spotify. Your
You
friends
can
showing you stuff on their phone every 5 seconds.
you can find shitty
Um,
podcasts instantly.
you can
Look at
find,
us.
yeah.
You can
Apparently,
find this
anybody
shitty podcast.
Look at
anybody
this.
can make a podcast now.
Yeah.
So
We have that comment every now and again. I love it. So anyone can make a podcast? Answer
And
yes.
I
so
mean, like, it blows my
Answer
mind because
yes.
they're always like, I mean, do we have to get legal permission to do this? I mean, like,
No,
that's not how any of this works.
it's quite easy. Yeah, I think that's a good thing. I do. I think what happens is I think we brought down the ceiling and we allowed ourselves to do many 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 more things. This kind of connects way back when to the initial aesthetics episode that we did, where y'all talked where we had this rant about how shitty architecture is now and how like all the new art sucks. And I thought, and I still do, that a lot of it is just the fact that you can create now with so many things. And it's so much easier to create and build, both with new materials and how much easier it is in the world today that you can experiment with all sorts of things. And the same thing's true for art. You can create so many more things, and it's so much of it is so much more available to you. Before, if it's this is like the 1930s, you only have access to so much art, what's available at the museum or art show, and somebody had to vet that to you. And then nowadays,
Right.
you can go onto Pinterest, and then there's just a billion different uploads of people. Like, look at my canvas. I got a whole bunch of lead paint in my mouth, and then I threw up onto this canvas. What do you think of my art? You know, there's like people that do that.
I
But this is
feel
the thing.
yeah.
No,
I
and this.
feel
Yeah,
I
it's
feel
like.
compelled to say something at this
Sure, go
moment,
ahead,
right?
and then I'll just plug in.
So I would like to say, just like once and done, that like for all my girlies and dudes out there who are philosophically confused and think that we need to go back to hunter-gatherer society and shit like that.
Mhm.
Science and technology are the only reason why what Trevor just said is even possible. Okay,
Mm.
so
Mhm.
like we have raised the kind for lack of better terms, we've raised the poverty level so far beyond the caveman. You know what I mean? That we can now afford to be artistic people. All right,
Mhm.
Ah,
And there's still so much more progress to be done.
certainly.
I think so I think this is one of those things that's really interesting, and that I think you can kind of create a scaffolding of levels or categories of human civilization at this moment. This is what I mean to do. I read that book Primates once, or not? Yeah, Sapiens. Sorry, that book Sapiens. It's a wonderful book. Just talks about like the progression of Homo sapiens as we became like agricultural societies, and then eventually became civilizations, like in Mesopotamia with the Sumerians of like Ur and all that. I think that those different uh, eras, let's say, like of different hunter-gatherer groups here versus like different like small agricultural societies here to small city states there. I think what art is necessarily different for those things. So I think what Stephen just said for like art becoming available and being able to be easily translated from now compared to the past is true. If you look at it in terms of right now, like Bray, you and I, and Stephen here in the 21st century, compared to what was in like the 16th century, let's say. But I think there's something interesting about like a hunter-gatherer society, like a very small one. I think there's something sort of interesting about how what art was then, is so fundamentally different from now, and also from the 16th century. I think there are distinct differences that can be drawn from a hunter-gatherer society conception of creation versus like a Renaissance or pre-Renaissance period versus now. Like I do think the information era and the internet and all that isn't a binary of now we're in the internet era and that then they weren't. I think there are these very distinct categories of time transfers of what these things mean, and I think it would be good to explore these. What do I mean by all of this? I mean uh, like cave drawings and that sort of thing from this period, way over here, are kind of their own sort of distinct thing from being able to go into art museums or go in and see art done at cathedrals during the 1400s versus now. I think these things are there are many different levels you can scaffold here that I think would be valuable as we think
I
about art at
I
this time.
feel like I need to use your own language against you, right?
Well,
So would not Trevor bot say that like the AI thing that you made, would not
yeah,
Trevor bot say that the cave paintings are just their abstractions and that our Star Wars is just our abstractions, our moral abstractions?
I would
Um
go further. I would say you can derive wholeness if you want to derive wholeness at this moment. You can find these things. You are correct. I mean to say that you're absolutely right. But I also think you can also find distinctions or differences between us, this
but
period
so
and that.
like here's my thing, right? We are not more or less evolved than our cousins 10,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
10,000 years is simply not enough time to constitute it enough evolution to talk about what you're saying. And um you know, like why do I even bring that up in case we're not on the same page? we are not able to abstract more or less than they were. But it could be said that they had less to abstract about.
That's
Is that
absolutely
fair?
correct. So you touched it on the head. That's what I mean. I
Mhm.
mean to
Okay,
say
cool.
that
I'm
they
just trying to
exist
get on the
within.
same page with you.
Oh yeah, please. I completely. That's exactly what I'm touching on. I mean that the context that they lived in is different. Not they themselves were different.
Okay,
But
perfect,
Sure.
it's
perfect.
not their DNA is different. They themselves. This is where it gets complicated. Their DNA is not different, but the context is different, which therefore means that they themselves are in that way different. The way that they like
For
the Da
sure.
sign. If you're into like Heidegger, like their thrownness into the world at that moment
Well,
is
like
different between
you're
here
the
and there.
neuroscientist. You
Ah,
should tell us about how information received changes the brain, you know? And so we have access to
mhm.
more information. Period.
Well, yes. Well, it's not. I always think of the brain as a bit of a reverberation. It's just a like sound, and then like these things are made in concurrence with the sound around you. A sort of feedback loop between what is the universe and what is the universe. It's just, and then you create this dividing line and say, well, that's the brain. And then you're like, well, I can't really understand the brain without the full central nervous system. Or I also kind of need the full the whole nervous system. Well, actually, I really need all the senses to like enter into the sense organs to understand the brain. And the next thing you know, you have to kind of have the entire universe in order to understand what essentially is right here. Like really, it's just it's a reverberation within the entire thing. I mean to say
Certainly.
that just for anyone who's interested in neuroscience or the brain, that's usually the way that I look at it. And can I go on a very random rant real quick? Can I do that? That'd be all right. I have a really cool thought.
Is it about aesthetics?
No. Well, yes it is. Yes it is. Yes it is. All right. So do y'all know so you know Homo nalindi? It's the very primitive. Okay, so there's this uh I can't remember the exact years, but it was over 250,000 years ago. But further than that, there was this like subhuman. That sounds kind of demeaning, but a pre-human version of today's like an early version of man, like pre-Homo
An
erectus,
awkward intermediate, as Richard
an
Dawkins
Right.
awkward
would say.
intermediate. Yes, and this was in
Transitional species.
yes,
Transitional.
transitional. If you want to look at it that way, they were really small. They had their brains were about the third of size of ours, all that kind of thing. And they were very there are a couple interesting things about them. Like they would like their teeth were they didn't have like huge forward facing canines like chimpanzees do. They had like what you and I would consider a normal set of teeth, but they had hair all over themselves, we think, and all that kind of thing. Well, really cool. I was watching this Netflix documentary about them one day, and they were talking about like, oh, we found pictographs inside of like a cave, and we think it was Homo nalindi. Like their bones were like buried. Also, they buried their dead, which is fucking insane. And also, like there are pictographs everywhere. Like this is the only case of like a non-Homo sapien species, or like a non what we would conventionally call human species, burying their dead. Like this is the first case we ever find that. Like they put them into a hole and then buried them, and they also buried them with tools. Like this is my daughter who just died. I'm gonna put her favorite like sharp rock that's used for like edging inside of her hand, like close it around her hand and then bury her like that. Like wildly human activities in something you wouldn't conventionally call human. The brain, the third of the size of our own. Wildly cool documentary. I highly suggest it. To be
We
honest, if you just go on the Netflix and look up Homo nalindi, you'll find it. Huh?
we could actually conveniently return to aesthetics by asking this, right?
It has to do with yes.
So what aesthetics are limited by our biology? You know what I mean? And I'd
Mm-hmm.
actually really like to hear from Bray on that one. Like, because I know Bray is a transhumanist, right?
Mm.
Isn't that what we call them?
Probably, yeah.
And so what I mean by that is like in the future, if we augment our reality to such a degree that we're no longer bound by hands and eyes, uh, you know, even ears and so on, what might art look like?
So this is, and I'm glad you said that because that is going to allow me to include something that encapsulates all three of these, in mine included, is that we need to return to the fundamental understanding that art is just human beings, or in this case, maybe not human beings, something, someone, some being creating meaning or imbuing something with meaning, uh, just being creative, that act. And so
Hmm.
that, however that looks when we are no longer maybe as identifiable in this form, is maybe I can't really say. I know a great number of different science fiction examples of where art might go. For example, the idea, and one that may exist in the next however many years, is sort of the idea of like being able to experience through the lens, multifaceted lens of someone else. Uh, so like to be able to have some sort of neural interface where I can feel, see, smell, taste the same way as someone else, perhaps, or a
That that
specific experience.
that kind of
Two
gives me
things. Yeah.
that kind of gives me an opportunity to plug my own work, Bray.
Uh,
Uh, my writing is what we would call a high fantasy setting, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, as any other author would suggest, like that's a really convenient like coat. That's a very convenient surface for what I'm trying to say. Exactly what you just said, like, right? It's creating meaning or imbuing meaning, you know. And so in my setting, uh, there are people who, if they can touch each other, can communicate what Trevor would call qualia.
mm,
Um, they can literally touch each other's psyche
I
by
love this
touching each
topic.
other,
I love this topic.
and that's so special to me.
It
Um,
is.
for those of us who don't know, especially my student listeners out there, I know you're out there. The tattoo I have on my body, right, is a constant intoning reminder that I cannot give up on this art project, on this thing. It's part of me, and I
Hmm.
want to put it out there. I want that meaning to get out there. You know what I mean?
We'll announce it
And
on the channel too once it's ready. I
yeah,
so fucking want to disperse this thing. I want to read it.
yeah. I mean,
Well,
for
this
for,
is
for
yeah.
listeners and for you too. I mean, quick update. Very quick. I have a definite story that I'm working on this summer. I have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and kind of now what is required of me in the next few months going into the fall school year and so on is to just write it. And my write club and I get together every month. We bounce ideas off of each other. It's just very wholesome and creative outlets, and I
Which pub do you
recommend.
meet at?
Say again.
I said, which pub are you meeting at?
Well, we're just meeting at our home because one of our people has a kid at home, so we just kind of gather with them.
Works.
But people, let me take an opportunity to say, if you do not have a creative outlet, and if you do not have creative competition, find both. You need both.
Mm.
Okay,
That second bit there, I love. I love. Can I say I have two things. I've been
for sure.
roasting two ideas. I really want to see what you'll think. So first off, to put a neat bow on this Homo nalindi thing. I said they found pictographs like art inside of these ancient caves with these burials. The first time we ever see that for like a non like just to just naturally produce art like that of like a non-human species conventionally. Uh, and like you see this art and like there were a lot of people like commenting about it because of course I went online afterward to like what do people think of this documentary, and a lot of people were complaining saying it wasn't actually pictograms, they were just lines, they were just someone drew lines. But if you look at these lines, it's really interesting. It's a whole bunch of perpendicular lines. So people would like basically, if you go over and look at these caves, on these cave walls, these Homo nalindi went up with like a sharp rock and carved a whole bunch of lines like this and then lines like this on top of each other. And what's interesting, what's fascinating about that, what's really cool about that is if you think about it in terms of the neuroscience. Well, first off, let me say, they find these same lines, these same drawings in ancient Homo sapien caves, like ancient Neanderthal caves, like perpendicular lines drawn like this, then drawn like this, like basically like kind of like man and his
And
symbols, like the
I mean,
collective
so like, I
unconscious.
have a quick question. Like,
Please.
are they like true rectangles? I mean, or are they just like quadrangles? Like, I mean, how good are they
Here,
in a way?
I'm drawing them right now to give you an exact idea of what they look like. Just draw them. They look like this. Do you see that?
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Hmm.
So just a whole bunch of
Almost
perpendicular
like a
lines.
weave, almost like
A little bit,
they could have
yeah,
had
yeah.
fibers weaving together and then drew that somewhere or something.
And I will say the Homo sapien one had like a whole bunch more. At least the one that they showed in this
Yeah.
documentary was kind of funny. Like, oh look, we can do even more. But they find these in all sorts of cave reliefs from all sorts of various versions of mankind as we got there. And I suddenly realized that this really reminds me of Man and His Symbols and Carl Jung and the idea of the collective unconscious. This is an ancient symbol that constantly comes back. And I was like, well, why would it come back? Why would this be written into our DNA to do something like that? And then I realized the occipital lobe in the brain. If you don't know, the occipital lobe is used for the understanding for the a lot of the occipital lobe is used for the eyes, vision, and it starts with the V1, the V1, and then the V2, then the V3 as it works. Furthest back is the V1, and then it works forward V2, V3, and then each one serves various purposes. It kind of helps you augment and understand what you're seeing. And I don't remember which one it was, unfortunately, but I think it was either the V2, 3, or 4 that's used to actually to specifically look at perpendicular lines. Like it's actually used in order to observe those sorts of things. And I just realized, oh my God, all of these different forms of humanity were all basically attenuated to that one area of their occipital lobe, and that was the first art. It was triggering that one area of the occipital lobe. Like you see it and it draws your eye to it. This weave, this perpendicular line, draws your eye to it. And if you think about that, that's in itself, it's like the arrival of a trans meaning. That is to say that it exists unilaterally across all of these humans for your eye to automatically be attracted to this weave because
Right.
it's just directly attenuated to
Well,
that one area of your brain that everyone has.
the line is one of the most fundamental parts of art, just in shape and form. And so, if you thought about the most primitive way of somebody developing art, you could think of just these not even human, not even Homo sapiens, just doing lines as
It's
such.
absolutely
Well,
insane,
so
absolutely insane to me.
I find myself in the odd position of like kind of disagreeing with both of you.
Go
I
for it.
feel very Trevor today. It could be my lack of sleep, you know. I mean, uh, but look. Um, I think that's a consequence of geometry, right? In other words, like, um, I'm always in the mood to explain or to hear that science and art go hand in hand. In fact, I just told uh, someone very dear to me the other day. I was like, there are two things that will save our species: science and art. I was
Right.
like, you know what I mean? And it has to. It kind of. We really need to figure this out. And anyway, uh, I just have the distinct feeling that that's just kind of a consequence of the universe and the reality that
You're
we live in.
absolutely right.
Well,
You're
this is a
absolutely right.
great.
I mean to say that I completely agree. That is to say that it is a consequence of the universe, this, and also you are a consequence of the universe. You're attenuated to the
Oh
universe.
shit!
That's what this is. I mean to say
But
that
as
it's all
Bray
one.
might say, we have imbued these
Right.
geometrical facts with meaning, right?
we
Yes.
have we have gone back, and somebody who was like, literally, I'm so fucking bored, I'm just going to scratch this wall with a rock, and we're looking at it going, look, the invention of art.
Well, so
Or something like
see,
that. But
that's what I'm trying to say though. Is like I I think I really think that artistic things were here before we were, because think about how attracted we are to landscapes. I mean,
Certainly.
you
right.
know, I don't know. I'm having weird
Well,
feelings
then
about that.
you would answer the question that I might ask: can art be created on accident? With yes.
Yeah,
Mm,
for
mm.
sure.
Oh,
But
Okay, so
then
for
as
example,
yeah.
there's a tree in my yard that has fallen over a creek, and if I could show you, it would be like, oh my goodness, this is a gorgeous little moment here, you know, that will deteriorate with time. If given enough
Mhm.
time, it will completely rot away. The creek will change course, you know, in a longer time from that, and so on. The nature is burgeoning with and the literal definition of burgeoning with art. We just have to look for it.
hmm
But once again, that kind of returns to we're giving it meaning, or at least imbuing it with
right.
meaning.
I mean,
Art
it's
it becomes synonymous with meaning at this point in this
you
discussion.
cannot have a this is something that I would say, there's that age old question or expression about, if a tree falls in the forest. In this exact particular example, matter of fact, if a tree falls in the forest but nobody's around to hear it, does it still make a sound?
Yes,
um
of course.
and- of course. And so then the question is, if a tree has fallen in such a way that we might find it beautiful, if we are not there to call it art, is it still art? I would say
To me,
no.
I would
Well,
also say no.
well, so but
I'm of
actually, Ray,
yes.
I would directly oppose you on that because I know you. I would ask you, can art be created without humans? And I know for a fact that you would
Well, so
say
that,
that Data from Star Trek is a wonderful painter, and he's not human.
Mm, mm.
but it
Well,
would require, and I don't want to go off on a rabbit hole in this. I'm just saying it would require some thing that is intelligent,
capable of
and
like actual experience and
whatever
qualia to
word you want to
feel
use in
meaning.
that
Sure.
field, to,
Yes.
like, a rock could not observe this fallen tree over the creek and say, wow, this has, meaning. It must be an intelligent thinking agent. That is the one that
Okay,
is
yeah, I'm on board. I'm on board.
ascribing the meaning to
Yeah,
it.
because I mean, like
So,
we
yes,
even have elephants that
Right.
paint on those canvases. By the way,
that's true.
listener, if you have not seen elephants paint, or chimps or orangutans and things like that, you need to, because it will inform you on how close they are to us and how
Mm,
badly we've treated them.
mm.
Let's
Well,
let
I
go
had
ahead,
I had
Trevor,
a
and then we'll
uh,
dive somewhere else.
I had a second point I had about this whole thing of being connected, or this connection of like qualia, like y'all said. I find this to be immediately compelling. I find this to be something that's really interesting in stories that we tell. Like, for example, the way I got introduced to this, at least one of the ways I was as a kid, I got really, really, really into that video game, StarCraft. StarCraft.
This is a perfect segue.
Perfect. All right. So in StarCraft, there's like these one species called the Protoss, right? Nerdy shit. But they have this like thing on the back of all of their heads. All of them do. Like all their hair all gets connected to this thing and goes down their head. And they call it the Kala. And it's this really cool concept where like a long time ago they were like a warring species, kind of like the Vulcans from Star Trek,
I was going to
where
say
they're
it sounded
constantly
extremely like the Vulcans.
yeah, like ancient.
You know,
Everyone copies. Yeah, it basically it is. It's a copy of like the Vulcans, but they were like a warring species for a long time, and they almost destroyed themselves until they invented this thing that essentially is this bond, this information exchange where I know what you're feeling. I am perfectly capable of. I'm perfectly attenuated, and I can see and feel your feelings at every moment, and that creates a platform for us to have a conversation, and it leads to the cessation of violence and the unity of these peoples into one like one people. Removes all the social divisions and allows everyone to become one people at that moment and create this civilization that stands the test of time. This whole thing, and I find that, and I hear that.
What they did was they
Yes,
took Vulcans from Star Trek
they did.
and the IP of Evangelion, you know, and said, you know what I mean? Because in
I haven't seen
Evangelion, you know, the
Evangelion.
AT fields dissolve away and they become one human. You
Wow.
know,
Well, that's an interesting question. That's an interesting conversation because a lot of the people, these transhumanists, whenever we talk about like the upcoming encroachment of AI, over like first our jobs and then maybe our lives. This idea that they may transcend us in those horror, in a sense, horror movies like The Matrix. I mean, you don't think horror movie, but I do. I think that that's like a lot of what you see, especially in the third one, are abjectly horrifying. You know, those sorts of things. And you see that, and a lot of people who are transhumanists say, well, we just need to augment ourselves. We ourselves need to become attenuated to in one with this thing that we are creating. We need to expand what it means to be a human being and expand our intelligence to also include what you and I consider the internet or information or this connection or bond to AI. We need to become one with the. We need to evolve ourselves essentially, not in the sense of DNA evolution, but in the sense of the expansion of our minds by including. Basically, that we should start to become what you might consider a cyborg or something, some sort of information input to be able to transfer information. And when I hear that and when I see that conversation, I'm immediately reminded of the Kala, voice crack, but the Kala, and like this idea where what's gonna happen is you integrate information from others more seamlessly with this sort of thing, with this sort of information integration, such as like Neuralink in the future. And that opens a conversation of, well, what happens when people have perfect exchange of information like that, perfect exchange of qualia? Would it then therefore reach a point where do we become distinct individuals who are attenuated to one another, such as like the Protoss from Star Trek, if you want to look at it that way, or do we become attenuated to each other to such an extent that we become what you might consider like a hive consciousness, where we become one? That is to say that Skynet isn't something that destroys mankind. Skynet is mankind. It's just all of our minds become a unity at that moment, an evolution to we are essentially all one qualia, where it becomes useful to abstract us more as a continuation, a full concatenation of one object instead of just a whole bunch of individuals in a space. It becomes less useful to look at you as a Steven than it is to look at the mankind, kind of like ant colonies, where it's no longer useful to look at singular ants. Instead, you observe the colony.
Well, I mean,
what the colony is doing.
like ants, we are eusocial.
We are, and if you want to, you can. An alien, if they were to observe us from space, could very easily watch the way that we all go out and start our day and then drive back home, start our day, then drive back home, and start a family and spread it out, and start a family and spread it out. You could look at that and think of it as kind of a silly little or a fun little system of peoples. You can look at it very similarly to the way that you and I look at anthills. You really could. What I'm saying is, as we exchange information to such an extent that I don't even know what sharing quality even means, but to be able to understand each other at that level, where it's like perfect information exchange to the extent that transcends just simple language. It becomes very. I become very curious over whether or not we lose what you might call our individuality in the future, within the next century or two. Anyway, that's something I've been worrying about. Take it away.
That's a good question. Anyway, sorry. No. So we're gonna dial it back here and get back down to a more personal level. I'm going to ask you, and it's great that Trevor talked about video games right there for a second. So I want to ask you what your favorite art medium is, if you can narrow one down, or one that you prefer or find yourself spending more time with or around. I don't even know what I was trying to say there at the end. But anyways, I will start by saying that mine, out of all of these, even as holding a degree or two in theater is not my favorite art medium, because I am sort of more... Well, theater is fantastic. Theater is definitely like up there, very high. And I'll explain why when I talk about video games, which are my number one. I was exposed to video games from a very young age. From like 4 years old, I had a PC across from my great-grandfather's and was constantly on there. Of course, I had a very balanced diet. I went outside and played pretend out there as well as on the on the computer. But, that's kind of one of the things that, like many others my age, we've all grown up surrounded by video games that are not necessarily akin to the Pac-Man style arcade games, or the Pong and the things that pioneered the way. these games are much more advanced and can, I would say, generate different feelings and different.
Listen, Pong lore is vast. Okay,
Yeah.
we know
He's
that.
right.
I mean, have you seen the state of that, thing and the ball?
Oh my god.
There's says a lot about society. Um, I'm not gonna go there. I could have gone down a rabbit hole, but yeah. Anyways, video games. Um, they allow you to do something to me that I've discussed in a previous episode, something that's very close to part of my personality when I was talking about Albert Camus and the Myth of Sisyphus essays about the absurd men and the actor being one of those, and that the actor seeks to condense many different lifetimes within the span of their own, to have as many different experiences as possible before they die. And that's a big part of who I am. I want to do as many things as I possibly can. I want to experience as much as I possibly can before I cannot anymore. And so I'm drawn to obviously art as a whole, because it allows me to dissect so many different meanings, so many different perspectives, but also experiences. And video games allow me sort of this illusion of that, perhaps you could call it. I can be so many different characters. I can do so many different things that I can't possibly hope to do in my lifetime, um, through illusory means, so to speak. Uh, and it's the same thing on the stage, and this is what I meant by I'll plug this in, is when you play a character on the stage, you are adopting someone and quite physically, vocally, acting it out for an audience, and living in those moments. Uh, and that's of course what Camus was talking about, was the stage actor. And so this is why, another reason why I think I am so drawn to virtual reality, because it seeks to continue to merge those two things, the stage actor and the video game actor, meaning you yourself behind the keyboard and mouse, or whatever method you use, PC Master Race. It seeks to merge those two together and bring you closer to what I was talking about earlier, which is just pure experience. For example, like through some sort of a neural link, where you can actually, I can touch something virtually and feel its likeness, or just have an entire, like in the Black Mirror series, where they just put something on their temple and it completely transports them in every sense of
Bray,
the matter.
I want to comment briefly on that. A student shortly before school let out was asking me some very, very deep, very hard questions. He put to me things. I won't go into too much detail, but it had to do with like the nature of experience, and like he had this thought that not necessarily that things change because we like will them to be or anything like that, like nothing absurd like that, but he was just very interested in the nature of experience, right? And so I just, for the shock value, to get the message across, and because I was in a hurry, I looked up one of those people who've like donated their body to science type things, and it's the brain, the eyes, and just the nervous system. And I said, Bud, that's you. That right there is you. Like this body, my hands, they belong to me. They're not really me. That nervous system, that's me in there. I'm a like, for lack of better terms, like I'm a digital being inside a biomechanical machine. And the quicker you kind of realize that, the better. Do not misunderstand me. You need to feel your body. You need to be in your body.
Right.
Therapists even recommend that. Like, like if you're ever really having a tough time, like if you're having a really neurotic time, take a moment, close your eyes, take a breath, and sink back into your body. You know what I mean? It's a very good exercise.
Feel the sensation of the wind on your hands, on your hair.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is, you know, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. Like, what will art look like later when we can directly manipulate this stuff with ease?
Mm-hmm.
It's tough. You know.
Tell me your
Um,
favorite art medium.
Do it.
so mine is very simple. Um, Books. Uh, so whenever you were, and I have a very good reason, and I feel like I have a very sound argument for this. Whenever we consider the film or the video game or even the theater, these are all visual mediums. Of course, they come with an audible component, um, but they're extremely visual, and the visuals have kind of already been rendered for you.
Mm-hmm.
Theater, movies, or video games, literally in that order in terms of like which came first. Um, which of course, we play acted a long time before we had books. We had music and play acting before we had language. So I mean, these are extremely important. But I truly view the book, the written language, the written thing as the pinnacle of the artistic medium. And I'm actually going to flip it on its head, not with reading it, but with writing it. You have to and once again, call me biased. This isn't a scientific
Mm.
field. I don't care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, like if I
Let
have
your
a bias,
biases run
then
free.
how about I give you the double bird and say that's my opinion?
Mhm.
But and you get what I'm saying. There's no objective right or wrong answer.
Hmm.
But as an author, um, I have created and destroyed many worlds in my head. I have lived the lives of so many of my characters. So many of them are different from me, but yet created by me. I've said before on this podcast, I believe at least once, my friends, so supportive as they are, and in this sense, I refuse to call them friends. They're my family. Are so supportive. Um, they it's so vain for me to say so, but like we've been talking about my story before, and I have caught them googling things about my story, and then they look at me and go, "It's not on Google. I can't find it. You haven't written it yet." You know what I mean? Like they're that invested in it. You know what I mean? And that gives me such hope that it's a compelling narrative. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so, as an educator, I'll tackle it from that angle too. We talk about how writing is a way to learn. It's not just a way to copy information. You can write to learn. And so, my point is, in authorship, I can try new identities. In authorship, I can try an unthinkable um, uh, number of systems that cannot exist in our present reality, uh, limited only by the facets of my imagination. And so, yeah, I know that's really meta. I get it. Like that's brushing up on like being too meta, but I don't care. Being an author has been one of the most rewarding things I could have ever done. And I've told people in my family before. Um, Sometimes and oftentimes I consider myself an author before a teacher. I mean that. It's important to me. And so that's my answer. That's my sound argument.
Lovely. Love it.
Sound. Very good. Very good. Can I say? I want to say something there. Uh, so the question exactly, it's like, what is your favorite medium? Is that it?
Yeah, what's
For
your favorite medium, or what do you find yourself spending the most time with?
what do I find myself spending most time with? So I'm terrified of picking things. I always have been. I'm not an absurdist. I'm not any of these things because I don't. I find myself getting invested in things way too often. Way too. If I'm ever doing something, it's this. Like I remember this really famous, not famous, but this one particular book I read once where they were like telling a story of Van Gogh, and like this man approached Van Gogh at some point and asked him like, "Hey, of all your work, which one's your favorite painting? And he says, this one I'm painting right now. And
Right, just this second.
just the second, just
Yep.
what he's doing. I'm painting. This painting, this one. I'm halfway finished. I'm still working.
Because I'm working.
This is my favorite painting. For me, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's to me, it's really hard for me to pick a medium because I will travel across and feel things, and I don't if whatever it is I'm presently doing, I'm invested in it. It's this thing. Like, for example, just to list a couple things, I suppose. I absolutely, I cannot live without music. I cannot live without music. In the mornings, I'll listen to there are a
Neither
couple
me, but
particular. Huh?
I could not live without it.
I cannot live without music.
If one day I go deaf, I will do everything in my power to get like a cochlear implant to listen to music exclusively. Like fuck like listening to people talk to me. I'll say I'm deaf. But I mean, but like getting an implant to listen to music. You know.
Exactly. I don't. I could talk to you about when I go on a run in the morning. I like to listen to that song in Trinidad. Not song, but like piece of like I suppose it's opera. Nessun Dorma, or however you pronounce it. It was this particular rendition by I believe his name is Pavar Lavarati. He's a very famous tenor, and this particular piece he does, this particular song he does. When it's I forget what language it's in, but essentially it's a song where like the tenor like sings about his like love for this woman who doesn't love him, and how like it's a bit like a like standing on like the like on the grass while outside of someone's door sort of thing, like confessing your love for someone who's not interested, and it's this confession, and it's a beautiful song, and it's a beautiful liberating sort of like a desperate feeling there, and it's a wonderful piece of music, and I listen to it in the mornings, and at that moment it's my favorite song. It is. Or if I travel around and I'm reading several books, and I get into something and I'm invested in it, and it's just this. I'm terrified of picking things. I am. I can't. I'm not sure if I could provide one. I could just tell you. I don't know. I mean, as boring as it is, I really like music. I really like books. I really like films. I can't pick something. I can't be made to pick something. It's what I'm presently doing. I fall into this one sentiment. Like I can't. Like whenever I get into a really weird way, like a really weird state of mind, where like I'm in like a really bad feedback loop where I'm feeding into it. I can really feel it, where it's just constantly me falling into one state of being. And it's just this one state of being. It's just this one state of consciousness that I am in. And the same thing could be said for that feeling of a call to adventure. You know, that that one symphony piece strikes you, and you get this, or this one story strikes you, like Treasure Island, and you're like, there's this whole world out there. It's just waiting. It's just waiting out there, and you just want to get thrusted into it, or anything else. It's
Right.
a falling in. It's that thrownness almost. I couldn't pick a mode. I guess I'll just say I like music. I don't know. Right now,
there you go. That's
today,
that's the romantic
right
answer via Trevor.
Yes. If
for
you'd
all
ask
the
me at this
romantics
second,
out there.
if you ask me this second,
Well,
it's music.
so that's what I meant earlier, right? I was like, I know I'm getting so meta with this, right? And I said that I was brushing up on being too meta, and then Trevor took it one step further because he's a line stepper. He steps over
That's
lines.
right. That's all I do.
He's an habitual line stepper.
Yeah, habitual line stepper. But seriously, so I talked about the creative, like the act of creation being the pinnacle of artistic, expression, right? As did Trevor. And, it's just like we're really on the same page. And I pick books because I'm an author. You know what I mean? But given a few other set of circumstances, I could be talking about music instead.
It's almost as if we just want to say we're searching for meaning, and there's meaning in everything.
And that's exactly what I was about to
people
jump
starved for meaning nowadays.
Right.
Starved.
And this is what I mean is that I've been guilty of saying in the past that you are at any given time are constantly in the process of writing the story of your own life, however cheesy and cliche that might sound. You are. I mean, we all need meaning in our lives. Uh, and so you at this very moment are doing things that you feel you want or need to do for what will eventually be your story, despite that one day it will be lost with everything else in time. You are writing your story, and so I completely understand people like Van Gogh or like what Trevor said, like whatever I'm doing right now, because obviously that's all you have is what you're doing right now. I completely understand that perspective. Uh, it's something that helped me realize that I don't need to conform to some sort of American dream ideal or some dictated by a parental figure, societal expectations, etc. Like I can just literally do whatever I want. It's my life. That's why I have a van in my backyard, because like I absolutely adore stories about just people traveling all, like I want to be Odysseus, like I want to be people are like, what would you rather be, a pirate, cowboy, or samurai? I'm like, I'll be all fucking three, motherfucker, and travel the world and just have all of these
I
experiences
mean,
and
it kind of goes back to what
die
you said
happy.
earlier, right? We've all played video games where we are a cowboy. We've all played video
Right.
games where we're samurai. We've all played video games where we're pirates.
And like Trevor, I can't choose. I want it all. I just want, like Trevor has said before, I just want to see everything. Like,
One thing I always want to say, whenever I talk to somebody about like an argument for like from a religious point of view, or like really anything where someone feels like very innervated, that everything is like this, like let's do this from politics, like someone who's very conservative and visualizes
Mhm.
everything in terms of being like through this lens of conservatism, or any perspective. A lot of the time, to me, it's like it's for the sake of fun, or for the sake of catharsis, or the sake of like the liberation of that feeling. It's sort of a feeling that you're innervating or being innervated by, like a glove being filled with air or energy, and it's just this thing that you play out. It's this thing that you become. And I can't help but be reminded whenever I see people making arguments, not realizing how relative things can be sometimes, that I'm reminded of a playground where me and my three friends are cowboys and we're shooting at each other. Bam, bam. You're dead. No, you're dead. I killed you first. That kind of thing. They call me big
Making up
something.
rules as you go along type
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
I'm Dirty
exactly,
Dan.
exactly. And then like suddenly you look to the left, and this is the exchange of ideas and the movement over to other things, and the movement of meanings. You look over to your left, and there are four people being not cowboys, but instead being space aliens, and that looks really fun. And then like suddenly
Hmm.
you find yourself doing that instead. And I mean to say this because if I were to sit here and go, I love books, or not, I love books. Better example, I love music. That would be me. I would say
Mhm.
I love music. Music is everything. Nesum dorlema, that kind of thing, and just get into music. I'm just being a space alien, and then like I switch over, and now I'm being
So
a cowboy.
you go see the new Dune movie, and you're like, fuck,
Exactly.
I
It's
got it.
all. It's
I love.
all. Yeah, I love movies. I love movies. Look at me. I love movies. This is all movies. You have to realize that you're just falling. You're in the sake of throwingness into something. You're in a reciprocal feedback loop with a particular state of amour. Like amor fati, like being in lovedness, and you just fall into
Mhm.
your amoredness over like it's a feedback loop you create in yourself where you have this cherishing feeling with this one object, or this. It doesn't have to be cherishing. It could be quite hateful. Just whatever feeling. It's a reciprocal loop. Like just the other day, I was on YouTube. I had no idea this would happen. It was so wild, so strange. I have not been on social media or even YouTube for a while, and I was just clicking on videos, and there was this like I was clicking on stuff like the Israeli-Palestine conflict, and I was really interested in like this. It all started like this. I was really interested in this one seminar that popped up just on my feed of like given by this Israeli institute called like How the Palestinians View Us. And I'm like, that's all sorts of layers of meaning there. I'm kind of curious what that's about, and I click on it and I watch it, and then from there I click on things, and then like it kind of gets kind of right leaning over time. Like all of my feed starts changing to really right leaning things. And then I
Mhm.
swear to God, this is completely true. I swear to God, I'm watching like a tutorial of how to do something on YouTube, and I swear to God, there are this is so weird. It's weird to say out loud. There are Hitler speeches on my YouTube feed. On my YouTube feed, there are 3 different speeches by like Adolf Hitler, and I'm
Our
like,
next ascetic meeting, I actually
We
wanted to pose this, and this is the perfect time to do so. Our
uh,
next ascetic meeting should be titled "Are Algorithms Ruining Our Ability to
mm,
create new or to see
or
new art?"
ability to
mhm.
think in a
Yeah,
lot of ways, or like, are they a new layer of thought, or like the creation of narratives? Are the narratives too profound or too powerful over the individual themselves that are
certainly.
innervating the narrative? Because
Well, and that's
honestly, that's what I'm connecting
oh
to
man.
here.
Yeah.
I think what happens is that's essentially what that is. It's the same thing as being a cowboy on a playground and switching over to a space alien. You're just innervated by this opinion. It's a feedback loop that feeds in on itself
Right.
over and over and over again until eventually
An
you find
echo
yourself
chamber.
consuming stranger and stranger content in today's world, and that's more or less what we find ourselves in. It's a bit like I used to do this a lot when I was a kid. I found it really fun. I could get hours of fun out of this. I would take my hand, do it now, and wrap it over my mouth like this. And then if you talk, you can like hear your voice through your ear in kind of a nasally, very loud sort of way. And I would just try to, I don't know, this is me at like 5. I would like make sounds and see if I could like make an instrument that only I could hear. I don't know. Anyway,
Mm,
that's kind of what this reminds me of. It's sort of creating a feedback loop
yeah.
within yourself. It's getting into a fetal position and then feeding into yourself over and over and over again, like eating whatever it is you want to eat, and consuming this one perspective.
I
Feedback loop,
I whew,
throwing.
I could not be more connected to that idea in my bones. Like, as much as I would love to dive into the algorithm thing, that's a great topic. We should definitely do that. Um, I am like I am like a human pinball inside of David Bowie's book warehouse, except all the books are different art mediums and different experiences that I want to have. And the warehouse is a pinball machine, and I'm just bonk, 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 something new, bonk, 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 and I'm going all around. And every time I make contact with something, I'm completely enthralled by it, and want nothing more than to just pursue that as much as I possibly can. That's why I do so many different things. That's why my schedule has a rainbow of different colors, because I have so many different things I want to do, whether it's writing or reading or playing the guitar. I would love to be in a band right now. I would love to be shooting a movie. I'd love to be on the stage. I'd love to be doing any number of things that are creative, because that's quite literally all I can do, all I really should be doing. um at this point, unfortunately, our political and societal structure does not support me in the way that I believe should be necessary. That's an aside. So as we're getting close to wrapping up here, um, let's think of another question to run around the table before we close in regards to these.
Make it a short one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What's your least favorite?
there you go.
That's easier. No,
What's
it's
your
not.
least favorite? That's a very difficult question, as a matter of fact. Um, matter of fact, let's bring this to what Steven said, and change it up a little bit. What art medium do you think is endangered, or is most endangered, or is in threat of collapse, or is already collapsing? Perhaps I think you mentioned the book, right?
Hmm.
And I think it's absolutely true that people just don't read as much anymore, not in the same way, I guess. Not like book club getting shipped to your house every month format.
Yeah, and
um
it's such a critical component, and that's why I brought that up earlier. Is like we have such new content, and it's good. I mean, there's 100 books, on this shelf labeled new content. If we assume that just 1% of that is good, then we have one book that we could make a really successful show or movie
mhm.
out of if we really wanted to. That fiduciary responsibility we talked about could be satisfied if they get their head out of their ass, like, you know what I mean. And let's just say that
Yeah.
1% of 1% of books are good. Well, if we had 10 shelves, or
Mm.
or 100,
Yeah.
or whatever, maybe my math's not doing right, but you guys get my point.
Right.
um
Yes.
I'm
I
really not sure
mm,
what my least favorite.
Well, that's what I mean is don't even think about it in terms of least favorite anymore. I think like just look at what do you think is the most, what art medium do you think is at risk most of just really falling
Honestly,
under the radar, slipping away?
honestly, I'm gonna make a kind of like really um it's just a feeling, right? I don't think films will be with
Mm-hmm.
us for forever. I think films are one of those things that will literally just kind of fade away. They're a product of technology, and technology will replace them. Yep.
Hmm.
I love
Interesting.
films to death. But I mean, and I'm not saying necessarily in our lifetime, and I know that this is
Mhm.
kind of like what we might call a hot take or whatever. But that's my vote. I
I would
think
say
Well,
I
just
think
as an
films are not here
addendum,
to stay.
I think
mhm.
as an addendum to that, I would just add that I think even contemporarily, I think a lot of film work is being shifted over to the long form or serial format, like series. Like they're saying, well, why make a single movie if that's going to send to the not as well performing movie theater and then just go straight to streaming? If we can just make a series to keep people engaged for as long as we want.
But I'm thinking a bit longer term than that, even Bray. I'm thinking about how
Mhm.
successful video games are at sinking people's time. And in other words, like if we look at how much time you spend on a video game versus a film, it's not close.
Right.
And they're interactive, whereas films are not.
Mhm.
And well, don't get me wrong, they are necessarily interactive. I'm talking
Sure.
about like y'all know what
They
I
will
mean by
not
interactive. Like
respond
you
to
can
you.
literally manipulate the world in a video game.
Yeah, I mean, I
And
don't really. Yeah, can I say one? I don't mean to interrupt,
yeah,
but I had a
Yeah.
sudden really interesting thought. If y'all, as y'all know, like the new GPT models and language machines are getting so incredibly good now. Like even like ChatGPT has a new 4.0 model that's free to use on the browser. That's incredible, and it's getting more incredible by the day. I can't help but be of think of what kind of situation we're in where you have an interactive world. And what do I mean by interactive? Like imagine Skyrim, but instead of having one of the four preset questions you could ask, like the like you know when you first like arrive at Whiterun, you know, and get up to the top of the thing and tell like the guy in charge, which is named like Ballroof or whatever. What's his name? The guy in charge of
Jarl
Whiterun.
Balgruuf
yeah,
the
y'all
Great.
Yeah,
boy.
Jarl Bargrove. You know, like you go up and talk to him. I remember, like, I played the game so many times as a kid. I knew all four answers of all four questions. Imagine instead, kind of like a Westworld. You all know that movie? You ever seen Westworld
Yeah.
before? It's a movie where like you go into a world where like it's a sci-fi where like these two dudes go on vacation to this island that's full of robots that think they're cowboys. You can be a cowboy for however long you want to be while you're on this island. You can just play in this world. You could shoot people. You can do whatever you want. You can shoot robots. At the end of the story, it's a big thing. They like the robots suddenly able to kill humans. And that's sort of the plot. But um, I can't help but think like what imagine what would happen if instead of that, instead of Skyrim where you have preset questions with preset answers, it's a fully interactive world where you have an entire intelligence contained within each of these characters. And you can just develop this world for as long as you're in it. The characters keep developing. You like marry a character, let's say at some point for fun, and then like you have a relationship that constantly builds and builds and builds as the years go by. You know, like I
I'm
could
here to
really
tell
see
you.
this. Huh?
I'm here to tell you it already exists, and I
Yep.
have already played with it. Not in Skyrim. Skyrim's there's plenty of video out there. I am playing Fallout 4 VR right now, and I
Hmm.
have an artificial intelligence mod called Mantella installed,
Yep.
and I can quite literally talk to any NPC and say anything through my mic, and they will respond. And I can go see the code that it prompts them with, like you are such and such character, you live in the Commonwealth and post-apocalyptic, yada yada yada. It's all there. We are only limited right now by the material virtual resources, in the
Mm-hmm.
sense of
All,
like
all I'm
memory
saying
and
is it's one of
code.
these things that Star Trek like called out so incredibly far ahead of its time. Like in Star Trek, you can walk onto the holodeck and have a completely interactive world,
Right,
like
Sherlock Holmes in that.
totally interactive.
Yeah.
You can manipulate any object, you can talk to anybody, and they will have a fully realized story.
Hmm.
And let's say that you're playing a Sherlock Holmes story and you do something completely off the wall because you want to. The computer will just adjust accordingly, according to the style of Sherlock Holmes. It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah. And
Reminds me of
and
the
that's that right now, just on that topic, is quite literally where we are right now in the field of AI. Just as an aside, it has to do with the aesthetics, is that right now we are scrambling. I say we, the companies behind all of these models are scrambling to find a way to power all of this shit. Because these new models that are coming out are going to require like so many gigawatts of power, like more than one single nuclear plant could provide on its own. Like they need an abundance of power to
There are
do this.
limits in physics on how far
Yeah,
this can go.
but mark my words, if things keep just pushing on, we will get there, and you will probably one day be able to just slip into some sort of device like as depicted in these science fictions and just have any experience you want.
Reminds me of that song Total Entertainment Forever by Father John Misty. If you haven't heard it, I highly suggest it. It's so good. The first lyric is betting Taylor Swift every night upon the Oculus Rift.
we will have become God.
Yeah. It's you do need to check out that song. It's kind of a really depressed
Father
song,
John Misty.
Yeah, but it's a nice octave. It's a beautiful song. And then it ends with they'll find us plugged into our hubs, smiles on every faces. Oh my, this must have been a wonderful place. But we're all just dead. Everyone died. And there's just a bunch of corpses with smiles. And everyone's like, oh, like aliens will find us and go, oh, this must have been such a wonderful place. They all had such smiles.
What a dark end to the episode.
Check it. Yeah. Very cool. Well done. This has been Aesthetics Part 2.
This has been Aesthetics Part 2, going every which way. We'll talk more about things of that nature on Aesthetics Part 3, which will be about something. So thanks for tuning in, everybody, and as always, you can leave your comments below and let us know what your favorite medium is. What do you think is failing? What do you think is on the way out the door? Is it radio? Is it poetry, sculpture, anything like that? Tell us your thoughts. We'd love to hear it. But until next time, we've been Four Mortal Coils. Take care of you. What do we say?
Take care of each other. Be good. Be excellent to each other.
Be good to each other. Here we are.